Welcome, O listener, to another episode of Scouting 5, recapping scouting news from around the world for the week of April 12th, 2021. I'm Scouter Ken, and today I'm recording from Firebag River, really. First off, a little apology from me. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had one of these episodes, at least. Such is the busyness of life. Hopefully getting back to a fairly regular cadence, though, of doing these Scouting 5 episodes. And we begin with some somber news this week, as we note the passing of His Royal Highness, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, who passed away peacefully at Windsor Castle at the age of 99 a few days ago. The Prince was a lifelong champion of youth development, and was actually the founder of the award that bears his title, the Duke of Edinburgh Award. For many scouts, like in Rover Scouts, I know this was kind of seen as like the capstone award, akin to the Chief Scout or the Queen's Adventurer. At the time, there was not the Rover Scout Award in the Scouts Canada program, so Rovers tended to look on the Duke of Edinburgh, the DV, as like the capstone award for their scouting career, although the award was not limited to scouting. The principle of the Duke of Edinburgh Award extended beyond scouting and was really just concerned with, youth development and non-formal education. That said, of course, the criteria of the Duke of Edinburgh, and indeed the aims of that program, do map well to the scouting movement. The Prince was also the patron to the Scout Association since 1952. And of course, Prince Philip was an avid supporter of scouting in the United Kingdom and indeed around the world. He made a point of always attending the Parade of Queen's Scouts at Windsor Castle whenever Her Majesty attended the event, especially during the centenary celebrations for scouting that were held in 2007, which is when Queen's Scouts from across the Commonwealth were honored en masse. And this next one isn't news so much as it is just an interesting article that is well worth checking out. It concerns the fate of the MV Golden Ray. It was a large ship that was ferrying cars, actually. One of many, many ships that, enables the global trade in autos. Very, very large ship. If you need to kind of form a mental image, maybe think of the ill-fated Ever Given that recently clogged up the Suez Canal. Another very large ship like that, except not a container ship. This one was actually carrying vehicles. And it collapsed. It had departed the port of Brunswick, Georgia, in September of 2019, had about 4,200 vehicles on board, and very quickly developed a pronounced list. It was starting to lean in the water. Eventually lost its balance and capsized not too far off the coast of Georgia. And so Car and Driver has an interesting story about how the captain of the ship was able to evacuate the crew. And evidently, the ship's pilot was an Eagle Scout and was very instrumental in, mustering the resourcefulness to make sure that not only himself, but everybody else on the ship were able to escape and be rescued by the Coast Guard. So, might want to check that out. A group of scouts from Red Deer, Alberta, Scouts and Venturer Scouts, actually, were recently honored for their efforts to aid one of their leaders who broke his leg on a backpacking trip. There was a ceremony held late last month. The 10 were presented with the Medal for Meritorious Conduct for their actions, which took place back in 2018 in mid-June near Siffler Falls, which is in Alberta, kind of, there's a small town called Rocky Mountain House. It's kind of just right in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And so Siffler Falls is about 150 kilometers west of there. The group was part of a venture-led introduction to backpacking camping, and the idea was to spend the night at a backcountry spot about 8 kilometers from the falls. There's a lot of crown land in the area, so you can just kind of freely go hiking and camping across the expanse of it. Around 9 p.m. on the night of the 26th of June, Scouter Ryan Morecambe was hiking with a group of scouts, and he slipped and he jammed his legs and foot between rocks. His injuries were severe enough that he couldn't walk back to camp, and so the others had to build a pair of log bridges to support him as he was taken back to their camp roughly half a kilometer away. They splinted his leg, dealt with the shock and pain that he was in as best they could, and then they decided to carry him out of the bush back to the trailhead, fashioning a stretcher from forest poles, tarpaulin, and a paracord. 6 of them carried the stretcher at a time, with a scouter running ahead to make sure that the path through the brush was clear. It was about an 8-kilometer trek, took about 2.5 hours to complete, leaving the scouts and venturers mostly exhausted by the end of it and drenched in sweat, but he was able to be met by a vehicle and taken to the Rocky Mountain House Hospital. So, well done, venturers and scouts. That is a fine act of heroism to save one of your fallen scouters. And I'm sure he appreciates the effort that you put in as well. And you see, that's why we teach you to lash knots, scouts, if you're listening, because it's not just, about putting 2 sticks together when, you feel like it. Sometimes there is actually cause to have to fashion something out of sticks and cord in order to help someone out, maybe even save their life. So an interesting little story out of the UK. If you're familiar at all with sort of the history of the scouting program, you'll know that, obviously we started with Scouts, and then a few years later, Cub Scouts came along. And the creation of Cub Scouts was largely informed by the fact that, the same men who would be showing up to lead Scouts often had younger children who would be in tow for scouting events. And so, Baden-Powell was kind of moved to create a younger section to allow these younger, first boys, now boys and girls, to participate in the program in a way that was more age appropriate to them. And then some number of decades later, a little over about 45 years ago now, I guess, another such evolution happened when Beaver Scouts was formed in Canada. And then, of course, that idea was exported to other parts of the world. There's beavers in like Ireland and the UK, Joey Scouts in Australia, and so on. And now it seems that the Scout Association in the UK is at least templating, thinking through, evolving the program again with what is now presently being called the Early Years Program Proposal. So this would be looking at youth that are even younger than the Beaver Scout age and how they can be incorporated into a scouting program. There's not a lot of detail on their website right now, although I will include a link to some of the proposed badges and challenge awards and top award. The top award is called the Chief Scouts Acorn Award, so that seems rather cute. Kind of a squirrel theme there. But who knows? Maybe in a few years' time. My son is going to be 4 next year, so not quite beaver aged, but maybe in a few years' time, other people who are in my situation where, there's kind of going to be that gap between one Beaver Scout and another, well, maybe there will be an even younger program that they can bring their 4 and 5-year-old children into. Some sad news from the Sevenoaks District Scouts in the UK. On April 10th, Westerham Scout Campground was broken into, despite the installation of extra security after previous break-ins, and a minibus belonging to a scout group was taken, and then was later found in nearby Edinburgh, burnt out and missing the entire front part of the vehicle. It's very disappointing. It's the second theft that the group, the Sevenoaks District Scouts, have experienced from in and around the camp, and obviously the loss of the bus represents a significant loss of fundraising effort as well. That was something that the entire community had really contributed in to provide the Scouts with, now torched senselessly by vandals. And finally, Scouts Canada is next week launching what they are calling the Great 8 Challenge. They will be featuring a series of events over the course of the next 8 weeks. Les Stroud, aka Survivorman, will feature prominently in a lot of the materials and videos and activities that are being produced, that'll be released to enable the Grade 8 Challenge. Councils and sections will be competing not just for bragging rights, but also for crests, and in fact one very large composite crest. It's like 10 different badges that combine to create like a super badge. And there'll even be like ghost badge versions of this, so that'll be rather cool. There'll be different challenges issued each week. Groups will have a week to complete them, and they can submit their results to Scouts Canada. So I will include a link to the Great 8 Challenge web page in the show notes, just because, might be something worth checking out. And finally, I know I talked about this with Scouter Colin in the previous episode, but I just want to put it out there again. Podcast app called Shuffle. That's at getshuffle.app, I believe is the website. And basically, if you listen to podcasts in Shuffle, it basically creates little chat channels that everybody who's listening to that podcast can see. And so it's currently only available for iOS. I do believe they have an Android version coming soon-ish, whenever you can sign up for, I think, notifications as to when that gets released. And, I would encourage you to do so, because I would actually really, really like to be able to see some conversations around podcast episodes emerge online. And I've got Shuffle installed on my iPhone, so if people do start talking about episodes, I will happily jump in and comment as well. And of course, it's all time-stamped, right? So as you're chatting, if there's a particular part in the episode that you're just like, wow, that was really cool, you can actually just leave a little comment right at that timestamp. You can do reactions, emojis, GIFs, all of that stuff. Just a cool little way to build some community around the Scouting Stuff episodes, if you don't feel like joining us on our Discord server. And that is all the news I have for you this week. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, be prepared.